this moves us to our action agenda. Do we have any motions on matters discussed in executive session?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve selected employment items Exhibit A.
Second?
Do we have any other motions?
Thanks. Yes,
Sorry.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve contractual matter regarding the purchase of property Exhibit C.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All opposed, all in favor? All opposed? And the motion carries 7-0.
And I'd like to make a motion that we approve contractual matter item E regarding construction management firm Exhibit D.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor? All opposed? And the motion carries 7-0. If we don't have any other motions, that carries us to number 13 on the agenda. Ms. Tucker, as she comes, do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion we approve the first reading of the proposal revision to Board Policy DKA, Payroll Procedures and Schedules, Exhibit F.
Second.
Ms. Tucker, do we have any questions for Ms. Tucker?
No questions?
Well, if we don't have any questions from Ms. Tucker, I'll enter. All those in favor? All opposed? The motions carry 7-0. Oh, Ms. Tucker is still with us.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have a motion for Exhibit G?
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of proposed revisions to Board Policy DKC, Expense Authorization and Reimbursement, Exhibit G.
Second.
Do we have any questions? All right, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that moves us along to our discussion agenda. Mr. Knox, Dr. Ross.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our CFO to just be in proximity of the podium there as our Director of Facilities, Alan Knott, comes forward. We had questions to the administration about the NPS report, its history, and so before Mr. Knott comes forward, I'd just like to kind of walk historically about where we are to this point. And we have Jay Glover from MPS, who is also on the line to assist us as we talk about our bond issuance. So first, just before we did the referendum, we looked at some guiding principles that would help us in determining what were our priorities of the referendum. And we presented to the public at the October 23rd, 2023 board meeting our facilities condition report. This facilities condition report was conducted by MPS, McMillan, Pasadena, Smith. They have published the report on August of 2023. In August of 2023, you could see the total of the 11,137 items that were identified to be over $182 million. You can see the report here. It may be hard to look at, but they put them in category rankings from 1 to 5. Just a reminder, they organized their reports of the almost 3.8 million total square feet from health, safety and security, building envelope, mechanical, electrical and plumbing, site conditions and interior. A score of 1 was extremely worn, that was the worst rated, all the way to 5, which was like brand new. Today we emailed you just another copy of that report that identified those 11,000 items. What Mr. Knox will tell you is at minimum, we were averaging 29 work orders a day in addition to that. So this is not a static number. On the day of its report, we added 29 additional things to that. And so we're constantly adding to that. And so the question is, how do we get ahead? How do we get our buildings to where they need to be? If you look at the composite of those items per school, the overall campus received a rating. A score 2 gave it that orange color. The bond referendum was designed to take care of those 1s and 2 rated items at those schools that had a composite of a score 2. Is that correct? And but that left those schools in yellow and blue. They also had 1 rated items and 2 rated items. And so our plan in our 5-year master facilities plan was to talk about how to finance these. We have 3 sources of revenue. The bond referendum, which passed in November, gives us a total of $240 million of bonds. We have our 8% capacity, and our 8% capacity, some of it's locked up with the IRMO project right now. But we do, in our scheduling and amortization of our debt, we keep $15 million every year for capital projects. And so Ms. Jenny Garris is here to, she's going to talk about the technology side, but that's about $4 million of it. And then the $11 million we use for the facilities. So we also had an opportunity with some callable bonds to have another $15 million fall issuance. And looking at Ms. Tucker to just make sure I'm saying that right. That fall issuance gave us another $15 million, and all $15 million of that could go to facilities. And so where did that go? We used that to take care of the 1 and 2 rated items at those facilities that scored 3 and 4. You see these on the slide. So it was estimated that that cost was about $40 million in August of 2023. We're putting $15 million to that. That doesn't take care of everything, but it gives us our first swing at the problem. So as a result, we're here tonight as we talk about 8% objectives is to address those 1 and 2 rated items at the 3 and 4 rated facilities. So this is really an opportunity to really go after that number again. And as the bond referendum is taking care of those facilities that are rated 2. So with that, as a primer, I'll turn it over to our Director of Facilities Operations, Mr. Alan Knotts, to talk about what we are putting in this year's capital to address those issues. Mr. Knotts.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Ross. Tonight we're going to go over the proposed 2026 capital projects. First off, we'll start in our technology department. I'm going to ask Ms. Jenny Garris to come up.
Thank you. Good evening. I've tried to make this slide very self-explanatory, so it lays out major items and some approximate costs of what we anticipate. Network infrastructure is kind of a vague word. Sometimes people don't know what that means. Right now we're in the process of a switch refresh, so we are switching that's in data closets, and that's very expensive. We've actually been doing that over the course of the last 3 years, and we hope to finish it up this next year. That cost you see there is actually a percentage because we also leverage E-rate funds to help with that as well. So other things are pretty self-explanatory. A lot of this goes in the classrooms. I do like to always point that out. Our devices, desktops, laptops, Chromebooks, A lot of that goes into classrooms, the interactive panels, which if you've been in schools, teachers really like those. And when we first started replacing those, it was as they died, they would get a panel, and so of course everybody's cheering for their smartboard to die. And we actually finally got to the point about 1.5 years ago where we were actually being proactive. So now we're replacing proactively. Obviously, if something breaks, we replace it, but we're proactively replacing those in classrooms. So with this next round of capital money, we'll continue to do that as well. I do think it's kind of self-explanatory, so I'll be glad to stand for any questions on this part.
I know that you said that most of these items here are things that are in the classrooms. What about these security cameras?
They are not in the classroom.
Where are they designated for specific places already, or is this sort of a as needed in certain areas?
So we've worked with our safety office over the past couple years. We've had security cameras in our schools for many, many years. The last several years, we've very markedly worked with our safety team. We've covered exterior entrances. We've covered large meeting spaces where we could have large gatherings of kids. We've worked with principals, so SROs, safety office, and principals all have input on where those are. And so, frankly, they're all over the schools, inside and out.
Ms. Huddle?
This is not really a question, but I guess a request for the board or to talk about it at another meeting, and that's Chromebooks for our youngest children. I get so many concerns from parents about the youngest children, mainly K through 3. And I was talking to somebody at, I think it was one of the Spartanburg. I think they're eliminating those for the youngest children. But the concerns that I hear from parents are too much screen time. Children can't write as legibly as they used to be able to write. And from older kids that because they started using the Chromebook before they were taught how to type, they learned to type incorrectly, and it's very hard to fix. So I would just ask that before, and I know it won't make a huge dent in the budget, and I know that there's testing issues, I know all that, but I would just like to ask the board that before we've got a couple of months here that we seriously talk about the Chromebooks, particularly for age K4 all the way through 3rd grade. I don't think 4-year-olds use them, do they? So it would be K5 through 3rd
No,
grade.
ma'am. If I can say that amount there for Chromebooks, we actually have a cycle. We actually purchase those for 3rd grade and 8th grade. So we don't purchase specifically for grades 1 and 2. We actually roll down the used Chromebooks when the 8th graders and the seniors turn them in. So we purchase for 3rd grade and 8th grade with the expectation that the student would keep that device for 5 years. And you're right, there's testing involved from 3rd grade on up, e-learning from 3rd grade on up. So that's why we developed the cycle we did with 3rd grade and 8th grade. And like I said, for 1st and 2nd, and a lot of teachers in K1 and 2 are opting not to send them home daily. They're in the classroom, and so I won't speak on the instructional side. Mrs. McCaskill can surely do that, but it really is something that instructionally I think teachers are really working hard to make that a balance. So.
Mr. Satterfield, then Mr. Bainum, then Mr. Herring.
Yeah, I know that years ago we had a sort of a cycle where we'd replace computers. Is the shelf life better or shorter now?
I don't know what they used before. Our cycle is about 5 years. So for teacher laptops, staff laptops, we do about a 5-year cycle. Desktops, because they don't move around so much, we go 6 to 7 years, and we're purchasing less and less desktops all the time because most people want a laptop to be mobile.
Well, my second question is that I know when we were going through the cycling of replacing computers, we were just tossing the old ones in the back of a truck. We don't do that anymore.
No, sir, we don't. And we presented on that, I think, a year or so ago. I'll be glad to bring that back the next presentation if you want to. We talk about the recycling, and we do kind of a buyback program. So when we turn those devices back in, so to speak, we get a buyback and we get a credit towards purchasing the next round.
Well, my question was, and these were different computers, obviously, but we had an advanced class at one school, and they would clean the computers, and then students could purchase them for a very minimal amount. So for those students who didn't have computers at home, they would have access. I didn't know if that is a reasonable thing to look at, or,
We've looked at that before. From a procurement standpoint, we've kind of stayed away from that. And we do give every kid a Chromebook now, so not having a device really isn't
Sure,
the
sure.
issue. I will say one thing we also do with some of our older devices is we pass those on to the classes here at the Kate Center and some of the middle schools and high schools that have
Right.
computer classes, and that way they can take them apart, see the inside, put them back together. The same with our switches, as we're doing this switch refresh. We've given a lot of our old switches, which really, they're still functional. They're just getting aged and don't have the security level that we need to keep up for our large infrastructure. And we've given those to the cybersecurity class and Mr. Johnson here at the Kate Center. And they've loved it. So they can do all kinds of things. They can learn to patch and program, and
Sure.
they really enjoy this. So we try to put those back in hands when we can.
good for you. Thank you, Mina.
This may be for both of y'all. So with the increased data load, Wi-Fi loads from all the cameras and the Chromebooks, with the older schools that maybe not were built around this, do we have maybe sort of adaptive cooling methods that we're using to take the load off of the HVAC systems? Because that'll burn an HVAC up quick.
Yeah, our data closets can burn up a lot of heat and get really hot. And so we work really well with our facilities and our HVAC team. When we start to see the switches get hot, we get alerts, and they're really good at responding quickly to that so that we keep them cool. It is a challenge in our older schools, absolutely, because most of those are retrofitted with data closets. And so we have some that are not in optimal places for cooling or even for safety and security more than safety, I guess. It's not really where kids can get them, but when they're retrofitted like that, it's difficult. So if you go to Piney Woods, for example, that data closet is just for data closet. It has a badge reader on it. Only certain personnel can get in, and that's optimal.
Well, do you see at some of the older schools that aren't, designed for that, do you see some of the servers and whatnot burning out sooner than they should?
We haven't had any burnout because we do get alarms and alerts. We have everything set up on there. But we have had some close calls where we've had to get there quickly, get fans in there, fans blowing to pull the hot air out and so on. Yeah.
With the Chromebooks, I noticed that it has the 1.128 million for Chromebooks and then the laptops. Is that because, does it say laptops because it's not the Google Chrome system, or why is it separated?
The laptops are really more for staff. Those are
The staff
Windows
laptops?
laptops. Yeah,
Okay.
HP Windows laptops, and then the Chromebooks are for students.
Gotcha, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Thank you.
Before Ms. Garris takes a seat, I do want to congratulate her to her staff. Just going back to what Mr. Satterfield said about students working, a student that she's kind of groomed, worked in the technology office in the summer fixing computers, fixing the Chromebooks, is now the district support employee of the year. So just to show you that our students can start right here and then end up working for us and then be celebrated district-wide. So he was in that rotation of making that work happen in the summer, but thank you. Sorry, Mr. Knotts.
So here are the 5 categories from the MPS report. And as we started to build our capital for the year, actually for the last 2 years, we started, we wanted to have every category, and then we wanted groups in a category to allow funding to address some of the needs that we've found throughout the MPS reports. So, as we've seen before, it's health, safety, security, building envelope, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Some of y'all may refer to it as MEP, site conditions, and then the interiors. Here's where we have broken down each category into the various groups, and we've added where some of the schools are going to get some funds for, let's say, the bidirectional amplifier. That was not on the MPS report, but that was something that came through the fire marshal. So some of these items that we're seeing is MPS report related. Other items are things that we have received some requests to get some deficiencies corrected through our local AHJs. And then we've also seen some items that have popped up over the last year through our work order system that we definitely need to address. So again, we're going over like with the MEP, one of our biggest group of that's HVAC. We know that we have a bunch of units that we have to replace. With the amount of units that we have within the entire district, there's a certain amount for us to stay or try to reach that 15-year lifespan, or to keep everything as close to that as possible. We have to make that investment back into the buildings. In addition to that is the overall automation controls. I know I was walking through one of the schools, and we were looking for the thermostat one day, and they were like, "It's right there on the wall." And I'm like, "Where?" I see an intercom, and they're like, "No, that's the thermostat, and the thermostat's about this big." I'm like, "Wow, that's pretty interesting. I've never seen that myself." So we know that we have some antiquated systems within the building automation. By having those upgraded will allow us to be able to dial in temperatures a little bit more, and also improve our setbacks, which is going to help us with our overall reduction in energy consumption. Site paving, I do want to cover one thing that, there's a big ticket item in there. It's 1.1 million. We do know that we have found out, and I think over the last year or so, that we have some things that we need to address over at Crossroads. So we have some retention ponds, and we have some drainage issues that we're getting some estimates for right now, and they're rather expensive. And then we go over the interiors. We know that schools, as we start moving to this, we have schools that definitely need to be paint, or they need a refresh with paint. In addition to that, we may need some internal signages that just throughout the years, you may have somebody may have a paper sign or something like that. We need to get to a district standard signage as we move forward. We've also put some additional money in there for flooring this year and furniture as we start the transition to the middle schools. And this year, we've also added a new line item that we haven't had in the past, is for the band instruments. We need to stay on a rotation in the cycle for the band. So that's another thing that we added this year. As of like last year, we had, I think, $250,000 for our activity bus, the maintenance, the vehicle cameras, and the GPS systems that we're trying to put on all the district vehicles. So that brings us up to the $11 million for the overall capital improvements.
Do we have any questions from Mr. Knotts? Mr. Bainum?
On the, I don't know, you'll know the specifics on this, but on the furniture district-wide, there's a lot of teacher workrooms, especially in our high schools, and then the teacher desks in the classroom that need replacement, not repair, but replacement. That $750,000, is that kind of just like a budgeted number that you're anticipating needs, or do you have specific requests?
It is a budgeted number, but we also know, just like with heating and air units, the furniture and the desk, they don't last forever. You get a little bit of water on it, and then you're gonna have some issues. So we're trying to allocate money every year so we can go through and get to a district standard of table and chairs. That way, the facilities department can maintain that a little easier. And then if we have some stock of a chair or a table, whatever it may be, and one school needs it, we can pretty easily shuffle stuff around to meet the need.
Okay. And then the last thing was, I was trying to see which tab it may be under, but there's, I believe, 2 high schools and 1 middle school, and it may be addressed in the bond referendum as well. There's signage out front, their main signs.
So
they're damaged or are inoperable or just need replaced. Is that something that's through this or bond referendum?
So we've actually had, we actually have several of the marquees that are in the process of being replaced. There's a, going through the whole design element and making sure that we have the design that meets the needs of the district. But then in addition to that, we might need more power. So that's something we've run into, an opportunity is to get the correct power to that site. So there are several of them that we are working through. Yes, sir.
Of course, I'm going to ask about the band instruments, right? I'm just curious, is that for band and orchestra, or just allocated specifically for band?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. So with the $1 million that the board approved for us to buy band and orchestra instruments this year, we were able to buy everything that was on orchestra's wish list and buy about 35% of what band needed. And so we put this back in here to put band back in the rotation so we can get to starting replacing those instruments on a every 5-year cycle or get that back in the cycle. And so we hope that this will continue to add to the money that was already allocated from the board. Since orchestra won't be for next year since we were able to get everything, but band, we want to start making sure that they get caught up and then have it in that rotation moving forward.
I've gotten questions. I don't know if this is a here question, but maybe it's something that we come back to. But seeing the playground fall surface replacement jogged my memory that I had gotten a couple of parent complaints, questions about playground equipment. And some of it's because maybe they moved from, one parent specifically I can remember, they bought a new house, so they moved from the Dutch Fort cluster to the Irmo cluster. So at the elementary school that they're at now, there's like not really any playground equipment. They just kind of stand around, you know, simple things like they don't even have, you know, balls or whatever, I don't know. But I know in the grand scheme of things, to some it might seem like a minor thing, but so many parents bring it up. And so at some point, and you talking about putting things in rotation just made me think about it, that I'd love at some point too if we could do kind of an assessment of the schools just so that everybody kind of has, you know, usable equipment.
So that was a part of the MPS, and then also in addition to that, every year we select a couple schools to go through an assessment with our insurance group, and they actually look and they assess the condition of the playground equipment and the fall surface. You know, so I think every year we're going to have something that's going to need to be addressed at every playground.
That made me think of something, and it's more a request, and that is, and it's not just capital, it's also operating, but, and I know every school's a little bit different, but last year we had an elementary school, his PTO raised $50,000, and I'm like, what in the world do you need $50,000 for? And we had another one that only raised $10,000. And that's really sad to me. And as a board member, I get asked, well, why isn't the district, I mean, we had $7 million left over last year, I think, roughly. Why aren't we paying for that? And I can't answer the question, partly because I don't know what the standard is, you know, and so is the I guess that's my question really is, as a district, is there a standard to which we should be funding the playgrounds, the art supplies, whatever, for all of our schools? Is that so? Is, you know, is there a standard? And then is there a rule or a law policy on what PTOs can get in addition to that? And that may be Dr. Ross' question.
I'll put them on the spot. I think I want to separate the questions, the operational and then the capital. So I think it's probably easier to handle the capital side first. On capital, there is no standard because we're built out at different times. So for instance, playgrounds, I can tell you like a playground at Dutch Fork Elementary School and the playground at Piney Woods would not be a standard. I do share the same concern when, you know, you look at, and I'm not trying to call any group out, but parent PTO involvement at certain sites are extremely powerful, and they raise a lot of money. And then at other sites, it's really hard to get parents to be involved, let those raise those funds. I think the struggle we have is denying that one site to say, no, you cannot put that program or that covering or that new playground addition into your school because it's not here. All of our operational funds are zero-based budget, so it would require, whether it's fund balance assignment or a funding amendment, we don't have a slush fund of money to rebalance those things on the capital side. In operations, I think the standard again with the school supplies, we generally, it is class by class. It's a very class subject specific piece. So it's, I couldn't say that every teacher receives this. Now, we do know that the state gives school supply money to everyone, but our operational funds, it is not standardized because we allow the principals to meet the program needs of each school. So I think as we look forward, if we were building all at one time, we would say, hey, this is going to be the standard. I will say in my case, we had a parent group donate a $750,000 scoreboard, but it was only going to be at one site. And there was not enough funds for the other two schools to get a $750,000 scoreboard. It was very hard, to be honestly speaking, to deny that community what they wanted to donate because the other two don't have it. So that is something that we grapple with. What I do think, and we brought this up, is that we would like to align our 5-year capital program with our 5-year strategic plan. And we would kind of do it like Title IX does it. Title IX says if there's disparities, you have X amount of time to get your disparities within line. Our new strategic plan, Dr. Harris, starts 2027-28. So what we would like to do is start looking at all the unspent capital, any contingencies, roll that up, and then take that to the board within a strategic plan to say, what can we do with this? So we are on a 5-year rotation. It's in line with our board policy of 5 years, but to get a systematic schedule so that as we look to move towards a more standardized position, we would have the funds to do so. So there is no kind of slush fund of let's make this up in the middle of the year, but if we look at aligning our 5-year capital plan with our 5-year strategic plan, we would now have the venue to start to make gains there. So I hope that answers your question.
Dr. Ross and Alan, one of you can answer this. Do principals still submit their capital request every year?
They have. I'll be the bad guy here, Alan. We've asked them to submit their capital. We did tell them that the NPS report would be our goal of fixing that. I think, and Heather can correct me if I'm wrong, I think historically we've looked at our capital as a special projects pot where we could do a playground here or a new activity room there. But we really need to start looking at it as our maintenance pot. Maintaining our, and you see, I mean, some of our facilities needs a good old scrub down, wash up, refresh. And so if we don't come up with a philosophy, to Ms. Huddle's point, what is our policy or procedure on that, on maintenance, we're going to keep getting behind the 8 ball. So we are looking at some industry standards of maintenance cost per square foot. But if we look at our operating budget, I think all of maintenance is maybe 3% of that budget, if that. So that's not enough to get us out of that situation. So we have to reframe now that 8% money, that $15 million. We know Jenny's going to take $4 million off the top. So with that 11, we really got to use that to maintain our things. So we asked them, let's get the NPS report taken care of. before we look at other things. But I'll yield the floor because I know you were all front line with the principals there, if you wanted to add anything.
I will say, I met with all the principals to talk about their operating and their capital requests, and the majority of their capital requests are things that were in the MPS study. It was HVAC, it was roof leaks, it was new paint, it was new flooring, it was, remove the lockers because we're moving to a middle school. I mean, it was things that we kind of already knew about, so there weren't many that were outside of that realm. There was a few odds and ends here or there for special projects, but it was the majority MPS study identified items.
The reason I ask, I know in the old days, every principal at every school, Jason was asking about furniture at one particular school. Every principal had to assess their facility, their furnishings, maybe a robotics lab or something that they wanted to add to their school. But there was a limited amount of money available. I mean, if there was $15,000 then, or $15 million, I mean, you could go and outfit put new playgrounds and fall surfaces or furniture, and pretty soon you're just out of money. And so I'm glad to see how things are going now, because it used to be all the principals would look at each other in the eye and we'd have to vote on who got what. And all of them were important. But like Dr. Ross said, over the years, we sort of got behind. And so somebody wasn't getting what they might need. Somebody else maybe had a greater need. Well, they felt like they had a greater need. But it's hard to get ahead of the game, but you don't want to get so far behind that you're constantly trying to play catch up.
Do we have any other questions? All right, thank you. That brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is the discussion of the board workshop and the survey that was in the packet. So y'all know we are meeting on Friday just to discuss our priorities for the year. The evaluation that is included is intended for discussion. We're open, I'm open to feedback, and even if you have thoughts about something that maybe we need to ask that is left off. I know there were some questions around why we were doing a self-evaluation. It's a couple of purposes. The questions that are in the evaluation are reflective of things that are already listed in our board policy under member conduct. It's not intended to be a slight to any of us by any means. It really is intended to help us self-reflect on kind of where we stand as a board individually, which things we understand well, which things we may feel we need, improvement on. I'm not trying to start a fight, so I'm not asking us to evaluate each other, just, do a self-assessment. From that, once you receive this, I'm not getting your responses, so I'm not gonna know what Elizabeth says or what Scott says. This is really intended for you to self-reflect, but the importance of it is for me to have sort of a rating system of where do we stand on certain things. And so, if we voted low on, I'll pick on Dr. Ross because I hope he wouldn't take it personal, but let's say for number 13 where it talks about, what we give, do we give full authority to superintendent? If half the board is on the, is it on negative with that, then that's something we need to discuss as a board. Why is that? Do we think he needs to be doing something different? What is your feedback? And so we can only get better if we understand who we are, what our roles are, what our responsibilities are. So that's the reason that I am graciously asking everyone to participate in the survey. Other things in the board workshop will also, in addition to this, we're asking each of you to list your top 3 priorities for the upcoming year. When we leave the workshop, we will not have 21 top priorities because that's not realistic. We want to have an attainable goal. So we want to see, a lot of us have things that overlap that we think are important. Maybe someone has something that they think is important and nobody else has thought about, but it gives us an opportunity to have just good conversation about those things, which I think is important as we look at preparing for a new year and look at going into setting our budget for the year. And again, if we can come together as a team and figure out our priorities, I'm hoping that it'll help us just sort of reach some of the goals as we move forward. And I am opening the floor for discussion, questions, feedback. Ms. Huddle?
I'm not shy. Well, first of all, I was very kind of confused when I got this because I thought we were having a budget workshop, but I guess it's broader than that now. I guess the self-evaluation thing was really weird to me, and when I saw that, and usually we get like a document on the front, like, I mean, where'd that come from? Like, whose idea was it to do that?
Well, I thought, so it's twofold. A big piece of it is, you are correct. You are correct. We are doing, it's hard because I like to look at people when I'm talking to them, but we are doing, a part of the budget of the workshop is to do our budget. But, you know, in full disclosure as a chair, I think that also as we work on our goals, and we need to know, I want to be a more cohesive board. I want us to mesh, and by mesh, I don't mean get along on everything, but I do mean, you know, kind of understanding what our roles are. I picked on Dr. Ross, I'll pick on Mr. Bainham. Like, we've had some conversation, and he's asked me, you know, some questions, and I've thought, you know, maybe we should have made sure, like, people know this when they come on the board, because that's a question that I also had, or something that I also didn't understand or know about when I started. And so that also was a part of our thought process with the evaluation, which is why I kind of use the example of, you know, for some of this, we may not even think about what we know or don't know until some of this is put in front of us.
Well, I did look through it all, and I'd like to, if it's all right, share some suggestions I have.
Yep, that's the point of this.
I mean, quite frankly, I would probably just take off for we have a policy. It says, I think it's pretty clear, we ought to read our policy, and there's a process in there. And clearly, if someone thinks they're not going to say, well, I'm not doing this. I mean, that's just.
I didn't hear what question.
4A, the self-evaluation. I think it's kind of silly. I don't think anybody's going to admit that they have poor conduct. And we have a process for that. If we think the process is flawed, then it could come in under suggesting new policy. So just my feedback, I would drop that and put it. Now, the second one is real interesting. I brought this up last year, and I'm just going to bring it up again. Goals are measurable, and if you look at those goals, they are not measurable. Those are what I would call objectives. So, I mean, if we really want to focus on goals, I think we should change those entirely and talk about measurable goals, just my own 2 cents, and really look at them. For example, I couldn't find the words academic excellence anywhere in there, which I would think, you know, would be one of our goals, and have a measure on that. You know, a big part of the board is accountability, and there wasn't much in there on that.
Okay.
So, you know, again, I would just like to see us adopt goals, objective goals. I think the policy section is very worthwhile. I think the budget section is honestly putting the cart before the horse and getting in the weeds. I think that until you have your goals set, you can't really talk about where your budget goals are. And I think most of that should be led by the superintendent. If the superintendent knows what the board's goals are, then they can come back with a budget and say, here's how I think this budget aligns with your goals.
Well, and that's what I was anticipating, that our goals would help lead that conversation. So I could have stated that differently. And I may know of your feedback. Do we have any other feedback? Mr. Bainham?
2 items, just a little note. On, under the board evaluation, the board policy, accountability, commitment to accomplishment. Number 4, we promote effective communication. We're not allowed to communicate officially as board members. It would have to come from the administration. And then number 6, we provide for the development and implementation of both all of that. For board meetings, we're presented with what the administration wants, and we just have to vote yea or nay. We're not allowed to develop anything. So, just from our viewpoint. That's all.
Anybody else?
If nobody else, I just kind of piggybacking on that.
Okay.
A lot of other public bodies, some school boards, some county councils, city councils, they have a kind of standing place in the budget where each member is given a chance to talk about their, an item that they would like to see on the agenda. And if we really want to come together as a more cohesive group, I think that would help. And that could be part of policy. There's a policy on the agenda. But just throw that out there.
Giving members at least one item on the agenda. Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
I'm sorry, but I was confused by Mr. Bainham's last comment about number 4. Would you say that again?
You referencing the communication? Yes, just as far as like, just for instance, any communication officially, we're not allowed to communicate as the board. It would come from the administration. They're the representation of the district.
I actually don't think that's true. If you read the policy, it says regarding board meetings. So if a member of the press were to ask us about what happened at this meeting, I think Ms. Snipes is the only one under policy. But then you also, this is why I think these need to be talked about, is honestly, I'd wonder if that's First Amendment right there. I mean, can you really have a policy that muzzles someone?
I just don't read it as being communication from the board. I read it as our district employees, students, parents and guardians, and community members are communicating, not the board. So I'm not really sure that would violate any kind of policy.
I'm just keeping up with the notes. Anybody else? Anything else for the good of the workshop? All right. Well, looks like that brings us to the end of the meeting. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I have a motion that we adjourn this meeting at 8:35 PM.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? And the motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Y'all have a good night.